When I moved into my first house, one of my neighbors was just incredibly awesome. He always had these stories about working on logging crews from all around the world. And when I told him that I run the local entrepreneur center, which honestly is something that I often get a look of confusion from, but not my neighbor. He just started telling me about all of the amazing startup ideas that he's had over the years. This is a guy that truly never met a stranger. And so when I needed a tree cut down, I asked him. I mean, he's a logging expert as my neighbor, right? And so as I walked up to that tree, I got a little nervous. This thing's leaning right towards my house, right? And if something goes wrong, I know I'm taking all the risk. Now, I shouldn't have been worried. This guy did things with a chainsaw that I didn't even know were humanly possible, and that tree fell exactly where he said it would. And afterwards, I gave him $200 in cash. I was so excited how easy and good it went. And if I had hired a company, that would have cost me thousands, right? And at first, he was excited. He didn't expect to get paid. It was just helping a neighbor out. But then it got a little weird. And he adamantly did not want to take the money. And we went back and forth until it was just awkward. But eventually he took the money. And he seemed happy. I was happy. We all just went back to our lives. Unfortunately, it was shortly after this time that my neighbor committed suicide. Turns out that he had been battling an addiction for a good part of his life. And it was the stigma and the shame around that addiction that led him to take such a drastic action. But the worst part for me was that I later realized that that $200 I gave him was how he was able to buy the pills that he didn't want to take. And that's why he didn't want to take the money. Now, of course, there's no way I could have known. He hid it incredibly well. But that was how I first learned that substance use disorders affect almost all of us in one way or another, and you don't always see it coming. And the numbers on this are staggering. 48 million people last year reported having a substance use disorder in the country. And in Northeast Tennessee, we're in one of the hardest hit regions in the state. And the state of Tennessee is often reported as one of the most severely affected in the entire country. But this isn't just about individuals. This is also something that affects the entire economy. Research has shown that with just a 10% increase in opioid prescriptions, we see a significant rise in unemployment because so many new addictions are formed and people don't go back to work. This is costing the U.S. economy about $2 billion per year. And so when we have employers out there that say, we have jobs, but nobody wants to work, this is a really big part of the reason why. Now, people are struggling, and they're trying to recover. But even when they do, the system's not always built for them to return to work. And I see this on a regular basis from aspiring entrepreneurs that walk into our Entrepreneur Center seeking some help with their ideas. And just a couple weeks ago, I was talking to someone who came to me and said that he had a great business idea and he was trying to change the trajectory of his life. He'd been in recovery for a couple of years now, but he just kept running into barrier and challenge after challenge. And he eventually told me that he often thinks about how much easier it would be if he just went back to jail. Now, it's not because he wanted to live that life, but he told me that at least there the path was clear. He got 3 meals a day and a roof over his head, and he had some type of purpose or job each week. But out here, it feels like the cards are stacked against you. If you have a felony on your record, it can be almost impossible to get a job or to start a whole new career path. And if you need a loan, good luck finding a bank that will lend money to you. And so many people in recovery don't want to go back to the jobs they once had because that was the environment their addiction began. But they often have to because that's the only choice they have. Now, as I looked into this, I just started asking questions. As an entrepreneur, anytime I see problems, I can't help but look for solutions. This honestly drives my wife absolutely crazy. I'm lucky she puts up with me. But as I looked into this research, I now believe that for some people in recovery, it might be one of the best paths forward for some people in recovery to do entrepreneurship. And for others, it might be their only path forward. I now call these people recovery entrepreneurs. This is anyone that has had an addiction and they went into recovery and then they started a business as a way to change their lives and the lives of their family. And this makes sense because entrepreneurship is one of the few things in life that you don't have to ask permission to do. Nobody's interviewing you, nobody's looking at your past. You simply start a business, and it's your tenacity that helps make it happen. And as I got to talk to more and more of these recovery entrepreneurs and started finding them everywhere, it was really their stories that changed my entire perspective. First, there was Mary. And Mary had been in recovery for a couple years. She had a felony on her record, and she didn't want to go back to food service because that was the environment her addiction began. And she's trying to find a new job or career path, and she's just running into roadblock after roadblock. And finally, her counselor said, "Mary, why don't you just start a business?" And she looked at him like he was crazy. I'm like, "Start a business? What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, Mary, you know supply, you know demand, you know marketing and sales. You were a really successful drug dealer until you got caught." And it worked. Mary now runs a multi-city cleaning business, one of the top ones, and she hires almost exclusively from recovery. And then there's Michael, who was in a very similar situation, but he started a printing company, and he also hires from recovery. But when Michael needed embroidery, instead of just starting up a new division, he took his best employee, and they started a new business, and he made a promise that every year the business did well and he stayed clean, he would give a percentage of ownership to that employee. And today, that employee fully owns that other business. As you might have guessed, that business now also hires from recovery. Now, these are just a few of the stories that I've gotten to hear through this. And as I talked to more and more of these recovery entrepreneurs, they also started to say things that just blew me away. They were incredible. One person told me, "My addiction was the best thing that has ever happened to me." Now, this stopped me in my tracks. I thought, how could anyone think this way? And he explained it to me. He said, addiction builds skills, not always good ones, but always real ones. He told me that people with an addiction are problem solvers. They're persistent and they're relentless. Now, as I heard that, it kind of sounded like every successful entrepreneur that I've ever met. I mean, we would say that Steve Jobs is a problem solver. He's persistent and he's relentless, right? But if I'm completely honest, as I started hearing more and more about this, I started to wonder if maybe my entire career as an entrepreneur is really just my own addiction. I think my wife's out there just nodding like crazy. But as we look into this, as I looked into this more and more, the question arose that if we know entrepreneurship can change lives, then we're all the recovery entrepreneurs. Well, first, there's more out there than we know. There's so much stigma attached to this that they often don't tell that part of their story. We also surveyed 4,000 people in recovery in our region and learned that about 10% are interested in starting a business, but they weren't doing it. So why? Well, from our survey, we learned that there were three main reasons. First, they don't know where to start. They also think that they have to have more money than they do. And last, they really never thought that this was ever an option for them. Now, the incredible thing about these three responses is that when we survey the general population in our community, these are the exact same responses that we get from our community. So this told me we don't have to do something revolutionary to make an impact on those in recovery. We could just take a program that we've been running for years successfully for our community and just offer this up to people in recovery. And that's what we did. And this idea is that simple. All we're doing is we're creating a bridge between recovery and entrepreneurship. And we hope others look at this and copy this model because we know how impactful it can be today. So this is what we did. We launched a 6-week startup bootcamp program, and we embedded it into a recovery center. Now, we did it that way because those in recovery have all kinds of barriers like transportation, childcare, and any number of things. And most of these problems are already solved when they're headed to recovery. And so we ran a program. And one of our very first pilots, we had a participant that said, having this experience, this class, it's life-changing. Now, Tanner was one of the participants that started his business at the very beginning of the program, and he was cash flow positive and making money by the end of the 6 weeks. He was the first person that has done this in all of the programs we've been running for the last 5 years. It's truly incredible. And the rest of the participants also did extremely well. We had a 100% graduation rate, and 75% of them plan on launching a new business within the next 12 months. And of course, all of them plan to hire from recovery. Now, this isn't just about starting new businesses. It's about creating entire ecosystems of opportunity. And so this is a big part of what our Entrepreneur Center is going to do. It's going to be how we continue to give back to the community. Because embedding entrepreneurship in recovery just makes sense. But it's not the it's not the entrepreneurship that is the recovery. It's a pathway back to purpose. Now, all of this takes me back to my neighbor. I really think about him a lot. I think about the life he lived and all the stories I'll never get to hear. He clearly had so much to give back to the world. But my guess is he just couldn't see it. He needed something else. He needed a way back. He needed a way to turn an unhealthy addiction into a healthy one. I truly believe my neighbor would have been an amazing entrepreneur. And that's the shift that we need to make. We need to stop seeing people in recovery from where they've been and start seeing them for what they're capable of becoming. And we need them to see it too. Because each person that we lose is not just a tragedy. It's also a missed opportunity for them to give back to the world and also for them to do the things they never thought they could do. So if you know somebody that's struggling, encourage them to get help. And if that person is in recovery, support them in finding a new path forward. And just know that that path might just be through entrepreneurship. Thank you.